YouTube, our 2024 NBA Western Conference Finals matchup is officially sealed, where the Dallas Mavericks will take on the Minnesota Timberwolves, with the Wolves having home floor advantage in the Western Conference Finals, and the winner will go to the NBA Finals and take on the winner of the Celtics and Pacers series. This is an exciting series on paper on many levels, mainly because we have two of the game's brightest stars in Luka Doncic and Anthony Edwards playing in this series, leading their teams to incredible heights throughout the season and playoffs. And normally in a video like this, my series preview videos, I would talk a lot about matchups individually and team wise. This video is going to be a little different because, if you guys follow my channel, I covered a lot of the matchup stuff in the Mavs video I just made a couple days ago. So in this video, I won't be doing too much matchup stuff. I'll do a little bit of a recap, and then we'll go into some X factors that I find really interesting for this series that could determine it and the outcome of the series. And then I'll get into my predictions for the series, who's going to win. Mavs versus Wolves, one of them's going to the finals. Let's talk about it, folks. So quick recap on my input about the defensive and offensive matchups for both teams, because as I mentioned, I talked about it before in a different video. I'll make this brief. So I actually think the Wolves have the better matchup on paper against the Mavericks. I think the Mavs are going to be at a disadvantage matchup wise, primarily with the way a lot of the Wolves defenders profile on paper: height, size, speed, athleticism, all that stuff. I think the Wolves have the advantage position by position, and I think on the perimeter it's going to be tough on the Mavs to get into what they want to offensively, a lot of times with the Wolves being the best defense in the NBA, again primarily on the perimeter. I think the lob threats are going to be a little bit more scarce for the Mavs with Derek Lively and Daniel Gafford because of the Wolves' interior presences in Rudy Gobert and Naz Reid. And I think the perimeter defenders of the Wolves, maybe more than any team in the league, are going to have a pretty fair matchup on Luka and Kyrie. That's pretty much it for the matchups. Let's talk about some of the X factors in this series that I think will determine it overall, and maybe some of the most interesting key factors for this series. Let's get into it. Let's talk about X factor number one, maybe the biggest one in this series and definitely the biggest one for the Dallas Mavericks, and that is PJ Washington. He is the X factor for the Mavericks because you guys remember in the last series, he really stepped up into that third option role for the Mavericks throughout that series against the Oklahoma City Thunder, showing a lot of offensive promise. And with Luka and Kyrie being the clear, 1 and 2 options, 1A, 1B combo and punch on this Mavericks team, someone needed to step up and score the ball when those guys couldn't in that third option role. And it ended up being PJ Washington, and it worked beautifully. PJ Washington has played some of the best offensive basketball in his career in the playoffs with the Mavericks this season after being acquired from the deadline. Now, why is he going to be such a key X factor in this series for the Mavs in the Western Conference Finals? Pretty much the same reasons he was in the Oklahoma City Thunder series, but I only think it's going to be amplified even more with this Minnesota defense. PJ Washington needs to average close to 15 to 20 points a game for the Mavericks to win this series, and he's going to have some big moments and big shots like he did last series if the Mavs want to advance to the finals. A lot of times, Luka and Kyrie are going to be worn down towards the end of games. They're going to need some big three-point shots and catch and shoot opportunities for these role players, and PJ Washington's got to be the guy to attack closeouts on the ball, knock down big time three-pointers. And like I said before, with the matchups being in Minnesota's favor and having a lot of the personnel to be able to guard Luka and Kyrie pretty well, maybe better than anyone could in this playoff, PJ Washington's gonna have to step up yet again and be that third option consistently. Now, I believe PJ has the ability to do this, but game to game, this is going to be a real point of emphasis for the Mavs, whether or not PJ can get, like I said, from within 15 to 20 points. I think a lot of these games are going to be pretty low scoring, somewhere between 90 and 110 each game. You're not going to see a lot of 120 to 125, finishes in this series. I doubt you'll even see one, because the Minnesota Timberwolves like to slow the pace down, and the Mavericks like to be slow and methodical offensively. So you're going to see a lot less possessions than you might think, and every bucket's going to be so crucial in this series. PJ Washington's got to get a lot of them, just like he did against OKC, and he's got to do it consistently for the Mavs to advance. I think if PJ averages close to 20 points a game, the Mavs probably win this series. Another really big, key X factor for this series that I could see being a deciding factor in it is the Wolves' size advantage from position to position, primarily in the front court. PJ Washington is likely going to have to be the starting power forward for the Mavericks. He's a versatile defender, and he's a pretty good defender, honestly. But when you think about the Wolves' front court, maybe the biggest in the league, Karl-Anthony Towns is going to be the power forward, and I think the matchup is going to have to be the 5-man for the Mavs at all times, guarding Karl-Anthony Towns instead of Rudy Gobert. You got to watch Gobert in transition, but we all know Rudy Gobert can be taken out of the game offensively with smaller defenders from time to time. He can struggle with taking advantage of mismatches, and I think you have to settle for putting a guy like PJ Washington on Gobert in certain situations and live with the results you get, because like I said, Cat is clearly the offensive threat out of those two, and he's going to take a lot of the defenders out of the perimeter and attack closeouts because he's the best big man shooter in the entire NBA. But I think the size in general, offensive rebounding, just both sides of the floor rebounding really, with the Wolves always having a combination of, their big three-headed monster at the center position of Cat, Gobert, and Naz Reid on the floor at all times. Two of those guys will be on the floor at all times, likely. The Mavs like to play a little bit smaller. They have a really good two-man punch at center now where they have a lot of size and interior presence at all times on the floor in Daniel Gafford and Derek Lively II, who I think is a big X factor themselves. Both those guys will be really, really important in this series, how they can handle those big men, if they can, limit the amount of times they get pushed around in the paint. But Cat, Gobert, and then you have, Jaden McDaniels at the three, Alexander Walker, Anthony Edwards, like the size of the Wolves, they just throw a lot of big bodies at you, man. And I worry about the Mavs' chances on the glass and defensively against these matchups. Like I said, it's probably gonna have to be PJ Washington or your center guarding Karl-Anthony Towns, and then that frees up Rudy Gobert to get offensive rebounds. One thing he does really, really well offensively is rebound the ball, kick out to an open shooter. I think the Mavs are gonna struggle on the interior quite a bit in this series, and I think the size of the Wolves, like I said, not even just in the front court, position by position, is going to give the Mavs issues a lot in this series, and it could end up being a deciding factor. Another one for the Minnesota Timberwolves, X factor wise, is Karl-Anthony Towns. We talked a lot about PJ Washington, how he needs to be really consistent as that number 3 option. Some nights, some guys are going to step up and hit big shots. Could be Exum, could be Derek Jones Jr. We've seen a lot in the Thunder series. Could be Tim Hardaway Jr. Could even be Gafford or Lively, in the paint getting those lobs. But for the Minnesota Timberwolves side of the ball, it needs to be Karl-Anthony Towns being Karl-Anthony Towns game in and game out, because Cat is known to be a little bit inconsistent at times game to game, especially in the playoffs. This is not something you could do when you get to a level of a team like the Mavericks in the Western Conference Finals. The margin for error gets lower and lower and lower as you advance into the playoffs, and Karl-Anthony Towns needs to chip in around 20 points a game every single night. There is no room for error in this regard. We talk a lot about Anthony Edwards and how he's the driving offensive force on this team. He's the leader. He's the guy you got to focus all your eyes on, but Cat is the clear and obvious number 2 on this team, and without consistent shooting and production from Cat in this series, and a good, like I said, probably 20 a night, the Wolves are going to be in trouble offensively. The Wolves have a lot of tendencies at times to get stagnant offensively and really, really let other teams go on runs where, I saw even in game 7 last night, at the time we're recording this video against Denver, there was a maybe 4-minute stretch where the Wolves I saw didn't even get a good shot, a quality open look, right? They dribbled the air out of the ball until the end of the shot clock and ended up taking a bad shot with a hand in their face, right? And that is not something you'll be able to do against Dallas, because they're so explosive offensively that you have to keep it close. You can't let the Mavs get away from you early in the game, late in the game, doesn't matter when it is. You can't let the Mavs go on a run. You can't let these guys' explosive offensive ability like Luka and Kyrie determine the games. You know what I mean? You got to be able to put up points consistently. The Wolves aren't going to be the best offensive team in the world, but they just can't go with these 4-minute stretches without getting good looks and taking too much time to get into their offense. Just not possible in this series. You got to be consistent, and I think Cat is the big X factor in that regard. He's got to be aggressive early and often in these games. He's got to look like, he really wants to attack the basket and score the basketball every single possession. There are no ifs, ands, or buts about it. He's got to be aggressive early and often in this series. And like I said, if he could put in a consistent 20, consistent, 15 to 25 every single game, I think the Wolves have a great shot. But he's got to be the number 2 night in and night out. There's no question. Another, key X factor I think could, influence this series is the Wolves home court advantage. The Mavericks actually throughout the regular season have the same record home and away, so I don't think it'll affect the Mavs as much as you might think. When you have a guy as great as Luka controlling your offense, crowd noise isn't necessarily the biggest deal in the world. He's not going to let that, influence his decision making. But the Mavs, like I said, at home this season in the regular season, 25-16, on the road 25-16. The Wolves do play much better at home throughout the regular season. I know we saw some irregularities in the Nuggets series where they win the first 2 on the road and then they come back and lose 2. They didn't play great at home in the Nuggets series, but throughout the regular season, just factually speaking, they were 30-11 at home, 26-15 on the road. The first 2 games of the series where they're at home, they have to win both of them. You do not want this to be a back and forth like it was with Denver. That leaves a lot of things and a lot of variables on the table that eventually you're just not gonna be able to overcome. You got to handle business at home if you're Minnesota, because you don't want to get into a back and forth thing like you did with Denver. That worked, but barely, just barely with Denver. I think you could see a similar thing happening here if it goes back and forth like it did with Denver. Handle your business at home, and I think you win the series pretty comfortably. One more for the Wolves, and then I'll, give my prediction, but the Wolves need to be more consistent and execute better offensively, primarily down the stretch of close games. And like I said, throughout, big portions of the game, like I said, they have a tendency to get really, really stagnant at times offensively. And I know their bread and butter is defense, but listen, man, you can't let the Mavs go on big runs. Like I said, they're going to no matter what, but you got to limit those runs and you got got to be able to score the ball when they're going on those runs. You know, the Wolves need to be able to find good shots in the half court more often throughout stretches of the game, execute their offensive stuff, get into it early, and, you know, get some open shots. If you miss them, you miss them, but you got to take good shots and you got to get them more consistently than you have been for stretches of the game. That's going to be a big factor in this series. I think whoever goes on a bigger run throughout a game in this series could end up determining it. So pay attention to the runs, folks. It could be important. All that being said, I do have my prediction being the Wolves win this series in 7 games and advance to their first finals appearance in franchise history. I think the Wolves are a more versatile team. They have the better matchups defensively, and they're the best defensive team I've seen in the NBA within the last 5 to 10 years. And I think that's going to end up determining the series. I really, really do. I think they're a more well-rounded and complete team as well. I think they just have a little bit more than the Mavericks in this regard. And like I said, the defense, I can't stress enough how important that's going to be on this series. The Wolves are smothering and they are relentless. And Anthony Edwards, we haven't even talked about yet, is that guy, man. He is going to do everything he can, and I would trust in him. I think it's going to be a really, really close series. It's going to be a lot of, you know, close games, and they're going to be a lot low scoring games, but I think the Wolves win this series by a razor thin margin in 7. Let me know down in the comments section if you agree. Think the Wolves win? Do you think the Mavs win? Who advances to the finals and plays who will likely be the Celtics? Hope you guys enjoyed the video, man. Like I said, let me know down in the comment section what you think of my takes. If I'm missing something, what do you think about this series overall, and who wins and in how many games? Let me know down in the comments. Thank you guys so much for watching all the way to the end. If you did, make sure you guys subscribe to the channel if you guys haven't already, because one, we're on the road to 12,000 and you guys have been so great with the support. Thank you guys for all the support on the channel lately. It's been amazing. We upload content just like this every single day on this channel, and I don't want you guys to miss it. So make sure you guys stick around. Make sure you guys drop a like on the video, because it really helps new people find the video and helps new people find the channel. We're trying to grow every single day. I just love basketball, man. I don't want to miss any more content just like this. Subscribe, turn on post notifications, follow my social medias. Links are down in the description, and I'll catch you guys in the next video, man. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day today. Hope you guys enjoy this series as much as I will. It's going to be a great one. Wolves in 7, like I said. Catch you guys in the next video, man. This is your boy D-Haven. As always, peace.